In Syria, we had 36 villages along the river Khabur. Back then, there were 11,000 Assyrians living in those villages, and they were full of life.
حلو.
I'm never going to say that again because of Daesh. 100 years ago, there was no such thing as saying Assyrian, Chaldean, Syriac. Those names existed. It had been used in the 1800s, but it became more popular in the 1960s. You know, all these articles were written against the Athuriyin, against these Assyrians that wanted to divide Iraq, which is nonsense. Assyrians never wanted to divide Iraq. One of my main professors, he was encouraging me to do a in-country language study, and he said to me, yeah, go to Israel. To be honest, I didn't want to go. I was always jealous of my family.
أوه ليش؟
I felt that they were more authentic Iraqis, more authentic Assyrians than me.
هل العراقيين حسيت إنهم مرحبين بيك؟ شلونك نيكولاس؟
الحمد لله زين. شلونك انتي؟
الحمد لله، شكرا على جيتك اليوم.
أني اللي أشكرك.
أكيد أنا كلش سعيدة إنه راح نقدر نسوي حلقة حلوة اثنيناتنا.
إن شاء الله.
نيكولاس، أنا راح أبدي بحلقتنا المعتادة. وسؤال حلقتنا المعتاد اللي هو إذا نشيل عنك كل المسميات، جنسك، جنسيتك، بلدك، عرقك، المكان اللي تربيت من يمه، دراستك، شغلك، منو يبقى؟ شلون تعرف عن نفسك؟
أوف. هي صعبة شوية، بس خليني أكمل بالإنجليزي لأن
No worries.
على مود أقدر أعبر نفسي بسهولة أكثر
أكيد.
بالإنجليزي. Who am I? I'm an Iraqi of Assyrian ethnicity, born in Australia. I was always curious about my roots when I was young, because I knew my family wasn't ever from Australia. We were always from somewhere else.
Okay.
You know, our house didn't have things that the neighbors' houses had. So our neighbors were not Iraqi. Well, actually, no, we did have, the next door neighbors were Mandaean, actually. They were Iraqi. But other neighbors, you know, they didn't have, for example, a picture of Hammurabi on their wall, or of the Lion of Babylon, or of an Assyrian king. So, you know, there was always this thing that made us different. You know, they didn't eat dolma.
صح.
They didn't eat kubba. So, you know, there was always something that made us different. The food, the culture, the values, the ethics. And as I grew up, I started to internalize that more and become more curious to know more about it. Unfortunately, see, I was born in 1983. Now I'm going to give you my age. So I was born in 1983. So I was born during the Iran-Iraq War. So we never got to visit Iraq. And then after the Iran-Iraq War, I was young. I was like 5. I just started primary school, and, you know, they would ask me, what are you? And then I'd go home, I'd ask my parents, what are we? We're Assyrian from Iraq. Okay. So then, you know, I remember in the first grade, all of a sudden, the Gulf War started.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for my whole childhood, you know, there was no possibility of visiting Iraq. And even like my parents were very scared of the past government, of the Saddam Hussein regime. حكومة حزب البعث طبعا كانوا يخافون. So they wouldn't allow us to even think of visiting Iraq. Like when I came to visit Iraq for the first time in 2002, قبل السقوط, before the American occupation of Iraq in 2003, the year before,
Okay.
my parents said to me, look, go to the north, but please don't go to anywhere that's under Saddam's control, because they were so scared. So imagine growing up in an environment where you know where you're from, but you can't visit, you can't connect with it on a personal level, on a face-to-face human level, and it's always something that's in the back of your head, that's very far away. but is in front of you every day in what you eat, in the music you listen to, in the decorations in your house.
صحيح.
So it was a bit of a dichotomy.
يا بس أنت يعني شو وقت بدأ عندك الفضول تريد ترجع تشوف العراق؟ يعني أنت
يعني على طول كان عندي فضول ارجع اشوف العراق. Sorry.
No
I
worries.
started in Arabic.
No
But
worries.
I was always curious that I wanted to come and visit Iraq. يعني I would always tell my parents, for example, why don't we go to Iraq?
ها
Yeah, why don't we visit Iraq? Because we still had family in Iraq.
صح.
I still had my aunties left Iraq in 1996 or 97. No, 96. My uncle left Iraq, I think, in 98, 99. My uncle and his family, they were the last people to leave Iraq. So, we still had, for example, relatives of my mother, relatives of my father, but it was difficult to go. My parents were too scared. And, after I turned 18, my family said, look, now they will take you to the army. Because
صح.
you're over 18 and
صح.
you're the son of Iraqi parents, you're an Iraqi, they'll take you to military service. So, unfortunately, it didn't happen until I was 18. When I was 18, that's a different story.
قررت تروح.
So, when I was 18, I found the opportunity to travel after I'd finished my first year of university. So, I took the year off. I got a loan. I even got a loan.
Wow.
I'd saved up some money.
Okay.
I found a job taking photos for a guy who was writing a book about the history of the Assyrian Church of the East. So originally he wanted a guide. And then he said to me, sorry, I'm sick, I can't go. Can you go yourself and take the photos?
Great
So I
opportunity.
said, yeah, sure. So, he didn't pay much. He paid about $2,000, $2,500 back
Okay.
then. But back then it was a lot of money
Yeah.
in Iraq.
And for someone also 18.
Exactly. And someone that's thinking of going on a trip.
Yeah.
So I did it. And my parents were so mad. They were really mad.
والله.
Because, my dad was disappointed. He said, finish your studies first,
صح
then go.
صح.
A lot of people telling me, you might not, when you come back, you might not continue your studies.
صح.
So it actually made me want to finish my studies even more. So while I was
Okay.
there, I was actually not just visiting. I didn't just come for fun. I have Andi Mabda, I have a principle. When I travel, I don't travel just for fun. I travel to learn something. I can't just go and sit on a beach or just, go and party it up in clubs. It's
You're
not my
always
style.
curious.
I'm very curious.
Yeah.
So, look, I was coming here and I was taking photos of the buildings around. That's why I got lost and I was a little bit late. So that's the kind of person I am.
Yeah.
I love history. I love old buildings. I love, learning about different cultures and different languages and, how much more when it's your own.
صحيح.
So I collected a lot of material back then. So I had a camera. I was really serious. I wasn't just taking photos for this Swiss author. He's actually a very famous Swiss author who's written a lot of books about the Silk Road.
طريق الحرير.
صحيح. His name is Christoph Baumer.
حلو.
And so, I wasn't just coming here taking photos for him. I was coming here to learn more about my roots. That was just an excuse to come here. I have a job. يعني.
Okay.
Right? But I came here because I wanted to connect with my roots, meet members of my family, see where my family lived, get an idea about the culture. And to be honest, I'm lucky I did come because there are some things that I saw back then which I will never see again, which no one will ever see again because the culture's changed.
شنو هي كانت هاي الأشياء؟
مثلا, for example, in Syria. So let me just say, I didn't just come to Iraq.
Okay.
Because Assyrians don't just live in Iraq.
صحيح.
So I wanted to go and see everywhere where Assyrians lived.
صح.
And everywhere actually that's connected to Iraq historically, culturally. So I visited firstly Iran.
حلو.
I went to Urmia in Iran, and then I came with the Assyrians in Iran. They had a group. We came for Wahad Nisan, for Akitu, for the Assyrian New Year.
Yeah.
And then I went back with them because the border wasn't official.
Oh.
So they couldn't stamp my passport. I couldn't stay in Iraq. I had to go back to Iran with them and find another way back in.
I see.
Yeah. So I, went to Turkey by bus. And then from there I went to Syria. And then from Syria I entered Iraq again. And because, again, the stamp in the passport wasn't official. It was at... back then, I didn't go through Ibrahim al-Khalil. I don't even think Ibrahim al-Khalil was open. We went through Fash Khabur. We crossed the river on a little boat. So it was
مغامرة حلوة.
Yeah,
مغامرة حلوة.
طبعا. So, we crossed the Tigris River on a boat.
إيش قد كان عمرك؟
كان عمري 18 سنة.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking. Yeah.
عادي. But I wanted an adventure.
حلو.
And because it wasn't an official border crossing,
Okay.
and my visa in Syria was only for 3 months, or actually less. No, I can't remember. 3 months. I'd have to go back to Syria to renew my visa and then come back to Iraq.
Okay.
And then go back to Syria I did it twice. So anyway, I visited, Iran, Iraq, Turkey, Syria.
Yeah.
I even got to visit my cousins. I had cousins that were refugees in Amman, in Jordan. I got to go visit them. The only thing I regret is not being able to visit Mosul and Baghdad back then. Back then when, we had a large population of Assyrians living here. So what were the things that I saw that I'll never see again? That was your question. I saw, for example, in Syria, we had 36 villages along the river Khabur in Hasaka province. Back then, there were 11,000 Assyrians living in those villages, and they were full of life.
حلو.
I'm never going to see that again because of Daesh.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah. Daesh, well, firstly, because of the civil war and the problems in Syria after 2011, the people in that area migrated. They started migrating. So by the time Daesh came in 2015, from 11,000 people that were there were only 3,000 left.
Wow. This is more than 75.
Yeah. And then when Daesh took those villages and took 250 people hostage, including some of my own cousins and my friends.
Oh my God.
So, the reason, I'll tell you that as well. I have cousins in Syria, and that's because of something that happened here in Iraq in 1933, but we can talk about that later.
Okay.
So, they even took some of my cousins hostage, and then, when they let them go, and they didn't let them go all at once, they let them go in groups. So my cousins actually were lucky enough to be the first group that got let go by Daesh. But they told them, don't go back to your villages.
سووا يعني تغيير.
They went, so تغيير demography. So my cousins ended up moving to Germany.
Yeah.
Okay. I only have one cousin left in Syria now.
Wow.
One. So it's a very sad story. Those villages along the Khabur, there's maybe 300 people left.
بس.
So I'll never see again
هاي الناس تكون بمكانها.
Exactly. That lifestyle, those people in that place. And same thing with a lot of villages here in Iraq. Same thing, for example, I visited an area in Accra.
رحت
called
لها
Nahla.
Yeah.
So
تخبل. So
حلوة.
nice. So
حلوة.
nice.
So I went to Nahla, if you've heard of Nahla. Nahla is behind Accra, and it basically, there's a valley with about 7 or 8 Assyrian villages. And when I visited that area, they had just gotten generators. They didn't have electricity before.
Wow.
They didn't have a proper road. Their road was still like unsealed, turabi. It had just been opened. So, things were still very new. I was there the first time they ever got to watch the World Cup.
والله.
Because they didn't have electricity.
Yeah.
So they got electricity, they bought TVs, every house started getting TVs. We sat around watching the World Cup.
Hello.
It was very fun, and I went to 2 weddings while I was in Nahla during that time. And the weddings were all outside.
شكد حلو.
And they were done in a very cultural way, very traditional way. Now people from Nahla go to Dahok and have their weddings in halls.
صحيح.
It's not the same.
تتغيرت الثقافة.
Exactly. الثقافة تغيرت هواية. So من هيجي قلت لك اكو شغلات هواية شفتها
بعد ما قدرت تشوفها هسه اختفت.
مو بس اني ولا واحد
واحدها.
Yeah. No one can see the things that people would have seen back then in 2002. So I'm very lucky that I made that first trip.
صح. طيب أنت يعني بسبب هاي التريب وبسبب اهتمامك بالأشياء اللي أنت تسويها اللي لها علاقة بالهيستوري بالكالتشر مال المنطقة مالتنا، هل هذا الشيء هو اللي دفعك إنه أنت تدرس ويكون عندك PhD بالدراسات السريانية؟
صحيح. Yeah. So I was always curious to know about my roots, and this is something that I say all the time. I was always jealous of my family.
Oh, ليش؟
I felt that they were more authentic than me. I felt that they were more authentic Iraqis, more authentic Assyrians than me.
ليش؟ ممكن مثلا لأن ما أعرف اسمك نيكولاس اسم
No, اسم والدي آشور كان. Yeah, أختي وأخويا سرقون ونهرين.
I mean.
Yeah, but still, I felt they were more authentic, not because of that. I felt they were more authentic because they were born there. They were born here, actually. We're here now. They were born here. They traveled around.
Hello.
They saw all the places. And, when you look at the family album, they knew all of our family back here. I never met anyone of our family here, they'd been to Samarra, they'd been to Ninawa, they'd been to Namrud.
كلهم راحوا لهاي الأماكن وأنت ما رحت.
Babylon.
Wow.
Yeah. They'd been to Sarsing and all of these Ahmadiyya. And so I'd never been to any of these places, and I would only dream about them because that's it's so beautiful, it's so historic. Or they talk about some of the springs, the water springs in Ahmadiyya. They'd say, they're so cold, when you put a watermelon in it, after you leave it for a bit, it cracks by itself.
خبل Ahmadiyya.
But I wanted to see that because we don't have that in Australia.
طبعا, yeah.
And they'd always make comparisons. Australia doesn't have this. Yeah, okay, Australia is safe. Australia is nice. It's stable, but it doesn't have this. It doesn't have that. It doesn't have this thing that we had back in Iraq. So they always had this nostalgia
أكيد.
and longing.
الحنين دائما عندهم.
الحنين والاشتياق. Yeah. So I always felt like I wasn't that authentic because they knew more than me. So I wanted to know more than them.
Okay.
And how can you know more than your family unless you actually get a PhD?
I mean, yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So, it was my way of proving myself.
أكيد.
And, I'm very grateful for doing that. I wouldn't change a thing. I would not have gone and studied anything else. Like, I remembered when I finished high school, my graduating grade was 95.65. My final grade.
زينة.
Yeah, not bad. And, there were higher ones, but it was not bad. In Australia, we have something called a mystery mark.
Mystery mark?
Yeah, if you get anything under 30, back then, they didn't give you the grade. They'll just say, it's okay, it's under 30.
Okay.
It wasn't a mystery mark. It was all right.
Okay.
But, my family, some members of my family were a little bit disappointed in my choice of study.
Okay.
Because, yes, I went to Sydney University, which is the oldest university in Australia. It's also, back then it was the top university in Australia. But I was studying Bachelor of Arts. Who gets 95.65 and goes to study a Bachelor of Arts?
وين تريد توصل بالنسبة لهم؟
You only need 70 to get into a Bachelor of Arts.
صح.
You're wasting 26, 27 points. Like,
Yeah.
go enroll in like engineering, go
Yeah.
enroll in science, in medicine,
Exactly.
law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
صدمتهم بوقتها.
Some of them were disappointed.
Okay.
I'm not going to name any, but some of them were
يعرفون
disappointed.
نفسهم.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I would never change that. I would never change.
Okay.
And it took me on a long journey. So after finishing my my bachelor's degree, I majored in Semitic languages. So I studied Hebrew, Arabic, Syriac, Aramaic, Akkadian, and obviously other related languages. I did, related courses like Arab world, Islam in the Middle East, archaeology, ancient history. And, back then Sydney University was a very good centre for all of that. And I was lucky in my last semester to be able to go on an exchange program. Now, back then, one of my main professors, he was encouraging me to do a in-country language study. And he said to me, why don't you go do an in-country language study? And at that time, what were the languages that I was studying? It was my final year. I was studying Hebrew, Syriac, Aramaic, and Akkadian. And he said to me, yeah, go to Israel. To be honest, I didn't want to go.
Okay.
And I wasn't that interested in Hebrew.
صحيح.
I was only taking Hebrew so that I could study Syriac and Aramaic. Because I couldn't straight enroll into Syriac and Aramaic. I had to have a solid base in another Semitic language. So that's the only reason I studied Hebrew. It's not like...
You were interested.
Sorry for the Hebrew lovers. Like, sorry, like it's a wonderful language.
Yeah.
But it wasn't my passion.
Yes.
Right? And even like I had the option of doing an honours year, but I would have had to do the honours thesis or the honours project.
Okay.
Which is, so if you get really good grades in your bachelor's, you can do an honours year, and that takes the place of a master's. So after your honours year, you can do the PhD straight away.
I see.
But I would have had to write something about Hebrew, and I was like, what am I going to write about? I'm not interested. Sorry. So anyway, he was trying to encourage me to go to Israel and to study like in-country, study Hebrew there. And I was like, no. I ended up doing an exchange semester in the University of Toronto and studying with an Iraqi professor there called Professor Amir Harraq. He's actually from Mosul, and he's an Assyriologist that was at that time teaching Syriac.
Nice.
At the University of Toronto, and I was very lucky to be able to study with him. So that's when I was at U of T. That's when I was living in downtown Toronto. So and then after that, when I came back to Australia, I didn't want to do this honours year. I ended up finding a very good program at Leiden University in the Netherlands, through other Assyrians that were there at the time. And they helped me immensely. So the program was Eastern Christianity, and I was able to specialize in actually just Syriac Christianity. So it was a master's degree in world religions, but you could specialize in one type of Eastern Christianity. And that was exactly what I wanted. And I went there and I did my master's thesis there, completed that by 2006, came back, and then the professor that ended up being my supervisor convinced me to stay in Australia to do my PhD.
I see. أنت سويت مالتك الماسترز بالدراسات السريانية، كان اختيارك يعني.
صحيح.
إحنا هنا بالعراق تعرف عندنا سريان، عندنا يعني جماعات مسيحية عرقية. هم كلدان، سريان وآشوريين. هم من يحجون يفهمون عن بعض، بس هم دائما يقولون إحنا مختلفين عن بعض. فالشخص اللي هو مثلا مو من الجروب من المجموعة المجموعة ما تبي يدوخ يعني. طيب أنتم شلون يعني تفهمون عن بعض وأنتم مختلفين؟ أنت برأيك من وين بدأ هذا الاختلاف بيناتهم؟
إن إحنا مختلفين مذهبيا
مو عرقيا. Okay.
We are, so let me explain in English. We are
أكيد.
different in terms of religious denomination, in terms of sect,
Okay.
but not ethnically. Unfortunately, lately, these churches have been taking on an ethnic slash political, let's say, aspect.
Okay.
Okay? So 100 years ago, or more than 100 years ago maybe, there was no such thing as saying, Assyrian, Chaldean, Syriac.
ماكو يعني عن قريب يعني.
Those names existed.
Okay.
Syriac wasn't very often used. It became popular in the 1960s, to be honest, calling people Syriacs. It had been used in the 1800s.
Okay.
But it became more popular in the 1960s. There was a French Dominican monk who lived in Mosul called Jean-Maurice Fillet, and he popularized the term les Syriacs. So before that, it wasn't that used. It was more Syrians.
Okay.
Okay, but Syrians as in Syrian, not as in Syrian.
Different
Syrian.
اختلاف.
So yeah, the difference is the greater Syria, Surya al-Kubra, as opposed to the Arab Republic of Syria, Syria.
I see.
So there's a difference. Now, like 120 years ago, you would be more talking about Nestorians, Chaldeans, and Jacobites. Al-Nasatira, Al-Yaqiba, wal-Kildan. These churches hadn't yet taken on this nationalistic aspect or political aspect, which happened, I think, after World War One.
Okay.
Now, yes, before World War One, they called themselves. I mean, we have documents where the Chaldeans are calling themselves Assyro-Chaldeans. يعني كلدو آشوريين. We have documents where the Syriac Orthodox are calling themselves Assyrians in English. In Arabic, Syrian, but in English, Assyrians. We have documents where people from the Church of the East were calling themselves Chaldeans.
Okay.
So it gets confusing. Now, when this sort of, let's say, these national projects sort of crystallized, I think, in my personal opinion, is the period from 1918, 1919, let's say, till 1933, which I mentioned before.
Okay.
So in 1919, at the Paris Peace Conference, you had different delegations of Assyrians going to Paris to ask for a state, because at that time, the Ottoman Empire had lost World War One and it was being divided.
صح.
So these different factions from the Assyrian people, from the different churches, Syrian, Kildan, Kanis al-Mashriq, okay, the Church of the East, they were going and they were saying, look, we want X. And we have the documents. There are books published about this, actually, in Arabic and in English. Unfortunately, they didn't get a state because the Europeans said, look, these people have been decimated in the genocide by the Ottoman Empire. They are scattered because, of what's happened to them. They're in refugee camps. We can't give them a state. And if we give them a state, it's going to be a Christian state in the middle of all these Muslim states. It's not going to work.
For them, it doesn't make sense.
It wasn't practical.
Yeah.
We were too much of a minority and we were too divided for them to allow us to have a state. So I think that's sort of when these different churches started going separate ways, because they said, well, if this Assyrian project didn't work, maybe we should look for something else.
Okay.
And I think what cemented it was what happened in 1933. Now, in 1933, the Iraqi army massacred 3,000 Assyrians and destroyed 60 villages in the north of Iraq. So the massacre happened at a place called Simmail in the first or second week of August 1933. Now, the Iraqi government labeled it a rebellion, a Thawra al-Athuriya, and it labeled it an uprising that had to be, repelled or quashed. So, that's why a lot of Assyrians ended up in Syria. Yeah. So that's why my cousins ended up, being part of the 12,000 Assyrians that left Iraq and moved to Syria. Now, the Assyrians that were targeted were Assyrians from the Church of the East, Kanis al-Mashriq, because it was the Church of the East, the majority, not all, the majority of whose members had lost their lands in what is now Turkey. So one of the reasons why people think that Chaldeans, Syriacs, and Assyrians are separate is because not only are these different religious identities, sectarian identities, but they've also become regional identities in a way.
Okay.
So most Chaldean Catholics live from Kirkuk up to Ahmadiyya.
Bishmal.
Yeah.
Okay.
From Ahmadiyya, past the border, into Turkey, into Hakkari, all the way up to Van, all the way to Urmia in Iran, they're Church of the East. Mostly.
كنائس المشرق.
كنيسة المشرق.
Okay.
كنيسة الشرقية القديمة أو كنيسة المشرق الآثورية. Okay, العشورية. So this was where they mostly lived. يعني not to say that there were not Catholics there, there were not Chaldeans, but the majority.
Okay.
Syrian Orthodox were mostly to the west of the Tigris River in an area called Tur Abdin.
Okay.
Mardin, Midyat, Diyarbakir, Nusaybin. So, the majority, There were, for example, Chaldeans in Midyat and Mardin and Diyarbakir.
Okay.
But the majority were Syriac Orthodox. Yani there are Syriac Orthodox in Sahel Ninawa, in the Nineveh Plain.
Okay.
But the majority were Chaldean Catholic. So when we talk about the majority, we talk about regional identities.
Okay.
So the denomination took a regional identity. Let's not forget the different regions have their own dialects.
صحيح.
So then they start treating their dialects as languages.
Okay.
And they start identifying those dialects with their religion, with their denomination.
صحيح.
So that makes it more complex. Now, the members of the Church of the East that were in Iraq at the time were mostly from Hakkari and Urmia. Okay, from what is now Turkey and Iran. Now, let's not forget, Hakkari was actually supposed to be part of Iraq. And this is what a lot of people don't know. In the original British maps of Iraq, what they had planned for Iraq, they had planned an autonomous area for Assyrians in Hakkari to protect Iraq's northern border from Turkey.
Wow.
But the Turks invaded in 1924. So the Turkish army claimed that it was part of Turkey, invaded it, took it, and now it's part of Turkey. And they kicked all the Assyrians that had come back out. About 8,000 people.
بعد أكو بحكاري
ماكو. أكو يعني مستسلمين.
مستسلمين.
وأكو صايرين أكراد.
واو.
هسه أكثريتهم اللي باقين هسه يقولون إحنا أكراد. So ما يعرفون
أصلاً.
لا. هواية منهم إذا يعني يذكرون فشي يقولون إحنا أجدادنا كانوا أرمن. لأن بالتركي أرمني يعني مسيحي. يستخدمون كلمة أرمن كمسيحيين.
I see.
When these people had lost all of their lands in Turkey, in 1924, that was the last, the last lands that they had lost. They were forced back into Iraq, or forced back into the rest of Iraq.
Okay.
Let's remember that Hakkari originally was part of Iraq. Even geographically, even culturally, it's more part of Iraq than it is part of Turkey. These people wanted autonomy. They had autonomy before World War I. Before World War I, the Assyrians in Hakkari were living like tribes, and they were semi-independent. If you look in Ottoman maps of the area from before World War One, they call that area Nasturi Arazisi, which basically means the Nestorian territory. It was the Nestorian territory. They didn't touch them. They left them alone.
ها حلو.
Yeah. So, they wanted that here in Iraq, or they wanted at least some kind of recognition. And the Iraqi government wasn't prepared to do that. The British didn't want to ruin their relationship with the Iraqi government or with the Kingdom of Iraq at the time. And so these Assyrians had to be resettled. And the government didn't have much land, apparently, at the time. And so where they were resettling these people actually didn't agree to where they were being settled, because they wanted to be settled in a compact group.
طبعا.
But they were being settled some here, some there, some in...
وزعوهم.
وزعوهم على تقريبا 70 قرية أو أكثر. 80 قرية يمكن. Actually more. It was 60 that were destroyed, so I was maybe 120 villages. I don't know. I need to look at my resources later on. But they distributed them among a lot of villages, say from Zaho all the way to Rawanduz. And from Ahmadiyya or Barwari Bala all the way down to Mosul. That whole area, they distributed them. And in a lot of places, they were surrounded by villages of not local Christians, like other local Christians like them. They were surrounded by Kurds. And because of what they had been through, the genocide, what had happened to them in Hakkari and in Urmia, they often didn't feel safe that way. And also a lot of these places that they were being given, they weren't being given the ownership of the land. They were just, for example, my grandfather and his family were renting a village. They were put in the village by the government, and they had to pay rent.
All the time.
Yeah, to the owner of the village every year.
Wow.
So they weren't giving them actually new places to own, to settle in permanently. And a lot of the places that they were being given were very unhealthy. So my other grandfather, my mother's father, the village that his family lived in, had bad water, or maybe it had malaria. But I think, they were telling me that a lot of people in that village kept dying. And my grandfather became an orphan by the age of 5. So my grandfather was born in this period. My grandfather was born 1927. So, they weren't happy. They wanted rights.
حقهم.
And when the Iraqi government didn't give them the rights that they were demanding, after everything that they'd done in World War I, don't forget, in World War I, because the Ottoman government had started massacring Assyrians, the Assyrians in Hakkari, who were semi-independent and who were tribal, saw all these massacres that were going around them to their people and to Armenians, and they realized if we don't do anything to save ourselves, we're going to be next. So they decided to join the British and the Russians against the Ottoman Empire.
ذاك الوقت. Yeah.
Yes. They said, if we don't do something to defend ourselves, they're going to extinguish us. They're going to exterminate us. So they ended up losing and having to go to Iran. Okay? But in Iran, they were known as, so in Urmia, which they controlled for about 3 years, they controlled that area around Urmia. They were known as the smallest ally of the great powers.
Okay.
So the triple, is it the Entente? Yes, the triple Entente, Britain, France, and Russia, they were the main allies, okay? And the smallest ally of them, after all the other countries that were their allies, were the Assyrians, and they weren't even an independent country, okay? So the Assyrians basically said, look, we helped you in World War I. We were on your side. We fought the Ottomans, okay, with you. at least give us some rights.
صح.
But they didn't give them any rights. A group was forced to actually go to French-controlled Syria to see what the French could offer us. And that's when things started to get bad.
I see. Wow.
So that's when they were told to come back. When they came back, the border post started shooting at them. They shot back. They killed the people, the policemen, the Iraqi policemen at the border post. And then that's what the Iraqi government at the time used as an excuse to say there is an Assyrian rebellion.
That's why they did the المجزرة.
And that's why they did the massacre, yeah. So it's very complicated, but you know it's a part of Iraqi history that's very sad, and I really hope that the Iraqi government eventually will recognize it, acknowledge it, and you know teach it in schools so these things don't happen again. You know, the new generations need to learn about this.
طبعا هاي أشياء ضروري يعني الحكومة تركز عليها يعني جهلنا بالآخر يسبب هواي مشاكل إلنا.
Yeah, so after the massacre, it wasn't just the fact that, you know, these people were, you know, some of them were sent to Syria as refugees, or they left, actually, they decided to leave Iraq. And after they left, their names were blacklisted. They couldn't ever return to Iraq, by the way. Wow. So our cousins that went to Syria, they were not allowed to come back to Iraq. If they came back to Iraq, they would be put in jail. Okay? It was like they left, their citizenship got taken from them, yalla bye.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was bad. And also the army, the soldiers that had committed the massacre, they were actually paraded through Mosul, through Baghdad. People came out and congratulated them for suppressing the Assyrian rebellion. They were actually congratulated for committing the massacre. And there was this, you know, all these articles were written against the Athuriyin, against these Assyrians, against, you know, these rebels that were against the Iraqi land and that wanted to divide Iraq, which is nonsense. Assyrians never wanted to divide Iraq. They always wanted to be a part of Iraq, but they wanted some autonomy and some rights. That's it. Okay. And, you know, there was even someone that was a witness back then describes the scene of people parading plates with watermelons in them, with daggers stuck in them. And that was supposed to represent the heads of the Assyrians with daggers in them.
That's crazy.
And, I mean, that's the symbolism that they used back then. And don't forget, it wasn't just the massacre in Simel. It wasn't just, you know, the destruction of 60 villages. You know, even, for example, the Iraqi government put out, at that time, put out an announcement saying, you know, if you find an Assyrian rebel, how are they going to know who's an Assyrian rebel?
شلون?
You kill them, you bring them back, you bring us their head, you bring us whatever, we'll give you money. These things were happening back then. So because the people being targeted were officially being called Athuriyin, they were officially being called Assyrians, and they were being portrayed in the media in a negative light. They were being portrayed as being against the government, against the state, against Iraq. So anyone that wasn't from this community, that wasn't from this church, decided, you know what? Aslan, we tried. Yeah, we tried in 1919 to have a state. We didn't get it. This is...
خلاص يعني.
Yeah, this is even more of a reason for us to stay away from this identity and to create our own identity. And this is when, for example, the Syriac Orthodox, the Chaldeans, they started really moving away from calling themselves Assyrians or from associating with Assyrians. And you know, already there was tension between these churches on a theological basis because, you know, historically, they were all one church.
صح.
In Iraq, before the 7th century, you only had one Christian church. the first division in Iraq, the first time the church in Iraq divided was when Tikrit and some of the communities around Tikrit and Mosul decided to become Syrian Orthodox.
okay.
Back then it wasn't called Syrian Orthodox, they were called Yaqiba or Kanisat Antakya, so Jacobites or the Church of Antioch. So that's when the first division happened. And, obviously when divisions happen within a community, there's a hatred. There is an enmity that develops, or at least some kind of a rivalry. Why did you leave me? Or the one that leaves says, well, why didn't you come with me? Why did you stay? Okay? And that festers. The same thing happened with the Chaldeans. So, after the 7th century, you had two churches in Iraq. You had the Church of the East and you had the Syriac Orthodox Church. In the 1500s, okay, the Church of the East divided. So the patriarchs at the time, the heads of the church, were being chosen from the same family. It had become a dynasty and the title had become hereditary. So if you were the head of the church
okay.
and you died, the title would pass to one of their nephews.
Oh.
So it would stay in the family. So, and a lot of the time these families were abusing their power. And a lot of the time, there was a lot of money involved. Let's not forget, these families, they owned a lot of property. Don't forget, if the church is being controlled by one family, then everything the church owns is also being controlled by this family. All the money, all the land, everything. So, and a lot of the times the people being chosen to become patriarch were sometimes minors, sometimes under the age of 18, and not experienced or not qualified actually.
Okay.
But, it was out of necessity because the period that this system was introduced was the end of the Mongol period, around the time of Tamerlane. And it was a time when the church was basically in its dark ages. It was almost extinct. Okay. So they had to find a way to survive and to keep the line of the patriarchs or keep the line of the heads of the church going.
Okay.
So it was a survival mechanism. Now, by the 1500s, there was a group that had opposed it. They wanted to take control of the church. They wanted this hereditary succession within the patriarchate to stop. So they basically had a revolution, let's say. And they sent the person they wanted to be patriarch to Rome. And this person went to Rome, went to the Vatican in 1551, I think. And he said to the Pope, well, our patriarch is dead. And the child that had been chosen to succeed him is also dead. Actually, both of these were lies.
Okay.
And I need you to make me patriarch.
Wow.
And so the Pope said, sure. And, obviously the catch was submission. So he submitted to the Pope. And he said, whatever you want, basically. So that group is what is now known as the Chaldeans.
I see.
So they have submitted to Rome. They've submitted to the Vatican. And so the head of their church is actually not the head of their church. There is the Pope on top of him. So, to each their own. They don't want to be an independent church like the Syriac Orthodox or like the Church of the East. They've tied themselves to Rome. And I've actually written a very long book chapter, about the process of how, the Chaldean Catholic Church spread during the 1800s. And that created a lot of enmity because, firstly, what they said about the ones that didn't become Catholic was they're heretics. They stigmatized them with the name Nasatira, Nestorians. They told them, you're heretics, you don't believe in the right faith, your faith is incorrect, and you have to change and submit to the Pope.
I see.
And so that created obviously a lot of, already before these names, it created a lot of enmity, it created a lot of hatred, it created a lot of rivalry between these different groups.
Okay.
So when you add these names to the mixture, it turns them not just into different religious groups, they start identifying as different to each other as well, as different nations or as different ethnicities, which is actually bogus. It's completely artificial. The former patriarch of the Chaldean Church, Cardinal Sarko, he was very strongly encouraging of this separation.
كان يفضله جدا.
Yeah. Well, the last two patriarchs, so Cardinal Sarko and Cardinal Emmanuel Delli, they were encouraging the separation. The patriarch before them, Patriarch Raphael Bidawid, was actually trying to bring people together and to create unity. Unfortunately, they didn't continue his mission.
Okay.
They didn't continue. They went against him. So anyway, he used to say, well, why should I be Assyrian? For the past 500 years, I've been Chaldean. My church exists. It's separate. We call ourselves Chaldean. That's it. We're separate to you. We don't need to come back and call ourselves Assyrian and say that we're the same people.
وهيك صارت basically الاختلافات اللي هي حاليا يعني سرياني كلداني آشوري.
هاي بلشت من زمان. هاي بلشت من وقت تعدد السكان الأمريكي سنة 2000. So this started actually in the late 1990s in America, when America was doing the year 2000 census.
I see.
Because back then, whatever you wrote, you'd be put into the same category. If you wrote Assyrian, Chaldean, Maronite, I don't know, Syriac, Tilkefi, this, that, the other, Suraya, you would all be put under the Assyrian category, or you'd all be put in one category. And then, you had community groups saying, well, I don't want to be put under the Assyrian category. I am actually Chaldean. I don't want to be Assyrian. Make my own category. And so and this is actually what happened in Australia recently. I'll get back to that later. So what they eventually came as a compromise was making the category Assyrian/Chaldean/Syriac to make everyone happy. That's the first time they used all of these names together. Like, if you don't want to agree on the same name, at least agree that you're the same category. And that's when you had a lot of sort of backlash against it.
هيك صارت.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, unfortunately, there are certain, let's say, political groups, non-Assyrian political groups from outside of our community within Iraq, historically, that have benefited from this kind of division and that have supported it financially.
Wow.
Yeah. In order to weaken us politically and strengthen themselves. I'm not going to name names.
Okay.
But there's also that factor.
كانت متضمنة بهاي الانفصال.
Yeah.
للأسف.
Yeah.
نيكولاس، شنو شعورك وأنت تتحدث أحد لغات العراق القديم والناس تقول لك يعني من تجي انطباعهم الأول عنك إنه هل أنت عربي؟
أنا ممكن أقول أنا عراقي.
أوكي.
ولكن لست عربي.
لأن هذا الشيء ينكر هويتك كآشوري.
ما ينكر هويتي. It's different. How can I explain? Arab is an ethnic identity in itself.
صح.
So being Arab I feel like being culturally Iraqi is not the same as being culturally Arab. Because
صحيح
not everything about Iraqi culture is actually Arabic.
صحيح
Iraq has always been a mix.
صحيح
Iraq has always had, Assyrians, Kurds, Turkmen, even Iranians, Persians. So it's been a very mixed country. Always, even in the ancient times, even, for example, you had Somar and Akkad. It wasn't always just Somar.
صحيح
So, two languages living side by side, two people living side by side in the same land, sharing the land together. So Iraq has always been multicultural and has always been diverse. And that's one thing that I actually think is a strength for us.
أكيد
I love Arabs. I have a lot of respect for Arabs. I speak Arabic. I've always wanted to learn more about the Arabic culture and then try and perfect the language, my skills in the language, but I'm not Arab. I'm
أكيد
Assyrian.
أكيد أنت من رجعت للعراق بعد كل هاي السنوات، هل العراقيين معظم طوائفهم مكوناتهم حسيت إنهم مرحبين بيك؟
For the most part, yes.
حسيت أكو ترحيب إنه دا يقولون الكل آشوري، كل شخص ترك العراق ومر بهاي الظروف الصعبة وتهجر، رغم هو التهجير يعني ما كان على مكون واحد دون الثاني، يعني معظم العراقيين أخذوا حصتهم من التهجير. فتعتقد إنهم راح يرحبون بكل عائد للوطن؟
Of course, yeah, and that's exactly been the case with me. Of course, you do have your exceptions.
أكيد.
But they are the exception, okay? They're the minority. For the most part, no, I've been welcomed. And people are very proud that someone born in Australia still identifies with Iraq and wants to come back to his country and, to live here and to, to try and contribute to the society. I think it's very important that we look at the positives here.
أكيد.
I could easily have said that I don't want to be Iraqi. I mean, my background is Iraqi background,
صحيح.
whatever that means. It can't be your background when everything in your house is Iraqi, when, the music your family listens to is Iraqi, when the food your mother cooks is Iraqi. Like, it's not really your background, but they use the term background, right? I could have easily said my background is Iraqi. My parents came from Iraq. I'm Australian and and I am Australian. As I am an Australian citizen and Australia gave me a lot of benefits. I had a very stable childhood, safe upbringing. I didn't experience war. I didn't experience violence. I did experience, let's say, discrimination and racism, but that's a different story. But I don't have anything against Australia.
Okay.
But
you are also.
I want to honor my roots.
صح.
And I want to honor, my ancestors and where they came from. And I think, look, I always say this to a lot of other Assyrians. One of the reasons why our people left was because they had problems here, whether it be problems getting their cultural rights, ethnic rights, religious rights, or whether it was struggling to gain acceptance from the rest of society or struggling to gain recognition from the rest of society and feeling like you don't belong. Okay, I understand that. Okay? It makes you feel like an outsider, and a lot of people say, Iraq's not our country anymore.
سامعتها.
Yeah. So you're not going to solve your problems by leaving, though. Your problems will follow you.
أكيد.
So if you want to solve your problems, you need to stay and you need to try and work them out. You need to try and find other ways of
تواجهها.
through it. Exactly. You need to face it.
Yeah. أكو صابع عندنا مندائين بالجنوب. هل برأيك الصابع المندائين بالجنوب هم السكان الأصليين للعراق؟
Now, this is a very hairy topic
Okay.
about indigeneity.
Yeah.
I participated once as an observer
Okay.
in the United Nations Forum on Indigenous Affairs or Indigenous
Okay.
Peoples. And they have this, I think, every year. And for a long time, we've had 2 Assyrian organizations that got ECOSOC status that were able to participate in these meetings. One of them is the Assyrian Aid Society, so جمعية الخيرية العشورية, and the other is the Assyrian Universal Alliance.
Okay.
Okay, الاتحاد العالمي العشوري. So they participate, or they were participating almost every year, and giving statements and stuff like that. And I was lucky to be allowed to go 1 year just to see what they were doing. Going into the United Nations building and sitting, it's something else. It's a different experience. And I remember the statement that was given by the Assyrian Aid Society that year. I can't even remember which year it was. Must have been 2015, 2016. I remember the statement given, and there was a big problem because they'd used the word sovereignty. We want sovereignty, or we want self-determination, and these words, sovereignty and self-determination, don't necessarily mean you want to split Iraq up. It just means you want to have more of a say in your own affairs within Iraq, because there is something that makes you separate or different from the rest of Iraqis. And that's not a negative thing.
صحيح. أكيد.
That doesn't always have to be a negative thing. That can be something very special.
أكيد.
And obviously these meetings are also attended by the representatives of different countries, not the indigenous people. The different embassies from the different countries that are at the United Nations. So you had people from the Iraqi embassy to the United Nations there. And their statement in response was, everybody in Iraq is indigenous. We don't have indigenous people in Iraq. We don't know why these people are here.
Wow.
So it's a very contentious topic to talk about in Iraq. It's very politically charged. But I will say this. Yes, okay, almost everybody in Iraq is indigenous. If they actually admit to being descended from the people that built the civilization in this country.
Okay.
Babylonians, Sumerians, Akkadians, Assyrians, okay? That would make them indigenous, sure. On the other hand, there are groups within Iraq that are maybe a little bit more indigenous
Than the others.
Not indigenous in terms of being here and whatever, but in terms of maintaining cultural traits or religions or languages
صح.
that existed before the Arab conquest.
Okay.
Or before the Arab settlement in Mesopotamia, which started around 200 AD. So the first Arab kingdom in Iraq, I think, was Hira in the south, and that was around 200 AD. So before then, you had the Aramaic language.
صح.
Okay, so yes, before Aramaic, you had Akkadian, you had Sumerian, but these languages are dead now. You have Aramaic, which is spoken by the Assyrians, obviously with Akkadian flavoring, with some Akkadian words, with some Akkadian expressions, very similar to how Egyptian Arabic is Arabic, but it has a lot from Coptic, it has a lot from ancient Egyptian in it. It's not the same as any other Arabic.
صحيح.
It's Egyptian. So that's why, in most cases when people ask me what I say I speak Assyrian Aramaic, because it's Aramaic, but it's Assyrian.
Yes.
And it's from the geographical area of Assyria. So that existed before the Arab conquest. Also, the Mandaeans, the Sabaean Mandaeans, the language that they pray in is Aramaic. It's Babylonian Aramaic. It's the Aramaic of southern Mesopotamia. And you have maybe 2,000 or 3,000 Mandaians in Ahwaz in Iran, in Khuzestan, that still speak the language.
They kept it.
They kept it as a spoken language.
Wow.
And this is a language that was in this land before Arabic came. And it's still here. So, you know, in terms of indigeneity, I would say Assyrians, Mandaians, Yazidis, these very small minorities now, they represent what Iraq was before the Islamic conquest, before the Arab conquests in the 7th century AD. And that gives them a different degree of indigeneity.
أكيد. حلوة يا منطقي. تعرف أني مرات أفكر يعني من أجي أباوع على العراق إنه إحنا يعني كلش متنوعين. تلقى من الشمال أكو مجاميع، بالجنوب، بكل أجزاء العراق. بس مرات أتساءل هي الأرض مالتنا ليش بيها هالقد تنوع مقارنة ببلدان أخرى؟ برغم أنت هم تيجي تباوع على سوريا هم عندهم تنوع، إيران، تركيا، هذه البلدان القريبة على بعض، بس أكو بلدان لا يعني ما عندهم هذا التنوع. فمنطقتنا متنوعة بشكل حلو.
Because it's rich. Because it's rich, because it's beautiful. Everyone wants to live here. Everyone wants a piece of this land. That's also why you have different countries outside of Iraq that are trying to, you know, let's say interfere.
ياخذون حصة.
They want to interfere to take their share of the wealth that this land has. But you know, this is the center of the world, and this is where civilization first started, the Fertile Crescent, you know, al-Hilal al-Khasib.
Yeah.
So this is where everyone wants to be. This is where all the religions were born. This is where Judaism was born, Christianity was born. This is where Islam developed.
صحيح.
After it was born, actually, this is, you know, you have religions like Mandaism, you have the Yazidi religion, you have Zoroastrianism, you have the Druze, you have all of the, you know, if you want to extend the Fertile Crescent into Syria, you have the Alawites, you have all these other groups. And, you know, it's beautiful. If people learn how to get along with each other, and to accept each other's differences.
بالضبط. هو على ذكر سيرة إنه الناس يعني شلون تقدر تعيش مع بعض وتتقبل بعض. برأيك أنت سافرت يعني معظم أماكن العراق محافظاتها، شنو اللي يخلي العراقيين متشابهين مع بعض؟ شنو النقطة اللي أنت تقول يعني لن عراقي؟ يعني أكو تشابه بغض النظر عن خلفيته العرقية الدينية، أكو هيك شيء؟
أظن أكو. Yeah, I think there is something Iraqi about people. When you see them, you feel some kind of a familiarity.
صح.
You know, and you know, even with, for example, you know, we didn't talk about them, but the Jewish community that left Iraq in the 1940s, 50s, actually, some of them in the 1970s and 80s. You know, I've met Iraqi Jews in Australia, in America, and when you meet them, it's like a family reunion.
Yeah.
You meet them, it's like, you know, there's some instant connection, you know, and that's the same. There's something about Iraq, about this concept of Iraq as a nation, as a state, okay, that whatever you are makes you different from someone that's the same as you from another country. So there are Assyrians in Syria, and they've only been living there since the 1930s, but they're more affected by Assyrian culture, and we've been more affected by Iraqi culture.
صحيح.
I lived in Turkey for 5 years, and I noticed even obviously the Assyrians are different between Turkey and Iraq. Even the Kurds are different. So, for example, all right, with Assyrians, it's different because the Assyrians in Turkey mostly are Western Assyrian, Syriac Orthodox, but the ones in Iraq are mostly Chaldean and Church of the East and speak the Eastern dialect. But when you look at the Kurds, for example, the Kurmanji Kurds, the Bahdini Kurds, the culture is different. You know, even the food culture is different. Even the way people treat each other is different. So you see, there is something different in Iraq. There is this Iraqi culture now, since the 1920s,
صحيح.
that has shaped us in the last 100 years and made us a little bit different to people outside of Iraq.
صحيح.
And that brings, so, you know, it makes us more similar to each other, as different as we are, than we are to people that are the same as us but living in a different country.
صحيح. Yeah, I had the same conversation with my friend. حكيت وياها مرة، هي سريانية، فكنا نحكي عن الثقافة والاختلاف وهذه. فقلت لها مثلا يعني على سبيل المثال أنا من دين وأنت من دين مختلفين، بس إحنا ناكل نفس الأكل. ثقافتنا مش شابهة. يعني حتى مثلا إحنا بالاحتفالات بالأعياد عندنا باختلاف أدياننا اثنيناتنا ناكل كليتشة. مثلا أنت ممكن هم من سريانية عراق من نفس الدين بس بغير بلد ما راح يسوون كليتشة. فإحنا ثقافيا كلش نشبه بعض، بس ممكن طريقة العبادة مختلفة، العرق ممكن يكون مختلف، بس إحنا هواية أكو أشياء نتشابه بيها لأن إحنا نتشارك الأرض.
Exactly. And this is something that I even noticed, for example, when I went to Hakkari, and I used to go to Hakkari a lot when I lived in Turkey, even before I moved to Turkey. So in Hakkari, you know, now it's like 95%, 99% Kurdish. But before World War One, it was maybe 50-50, 60-40, you know.
Okay.
Either side, let's say, you had a lot of Assyrians and a lot of Kurds, and they lived together for hundreds of years.
Wow.
And till today, actually, the Assyrians that came from Hakkari, they've kept the dances, they've kept the food, they've kept the traditions.
Wow.
Even though we've also become Iraqi, or we've become Syrian, or some have gone to Russia, actually. But we have still maintained a lot of these things. And when I would go back and I'd talk to them about the food culture, about the music culture, they would say, you know, the same thing. You know, we actually have the same culture, but we might come from two different nations or two different religions, but we share the same land, so we have the same culture. And that happens everywhere.
صح، منطقي. باعتبارك درست اللغة السريانية وفاهم وتعرف شلون تكونت اللغات بالمنطقة، احنا بهذا وقتنا الحالي برأيك شنو ممكن الحكومة أو السلطات تسوي فد شي تساعد على الحفاظ على هاي اللغة؟ لأن مرور الوقت إذا الناس ما راح تحكيها راح تختفي.
You're right. I think there needs to be an honest assessment
Okay.
of what the government can do, what the government can afford to do,
حلو.
and what it can actually implement with the people that are left.
Okay.
Because don't forget, the number of Mandaeans in Iraq is not the same as it was, 25 years ago. The number of Christians, Assyrians, Chaldeans, Syriacs in Iraq is not the same as it was 25 years ago.
دا يقلون.
But also, when their number decreases, their critical mass decreases as well. The people with the know-how decreases as well. The people with the qualifications
طبعاً.
decreases.
طبعاً.
So it becomes more difficult to find skilled people, qualified people that can implement certain projects or certain things.
صح. صح.
And you also have the problem of patronage. But I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to go there. But see, I think what needs to be done, at least for our language, because of the fact that obviously we have now 3 groups in Iraq that are all Christian, but let's say politically or religiously opposed to each other. Obviously not at a grassroots level, It's at the top level of mostly religious leaders that don't get along with each other. Iraq was forced in 1972 when it put out a law giving us language rights to use the name Syriac. Because it was the only scientific name that was common to all 3.
Oh, okay.
All of you churches use this language in your liturgy, which is called Syriac. That's the thing that unites you. And that's fine, but that language is not what we actually speak. And so now, for example, in northern Iraq, in the rest of Iraq, you have schools that are Kurdish curriculum or Arabic curriculum that use this language, and they say احنا جايين نعلم اللغة السريانية يعني شكو بها. يعني we are teaching the Syriac language to Christian students. But the problem is that's not the language they speak at home.
هنا المشكلة.
That's the language that they pray in at church. And if you're only going to give them a 3-hour language lesson a week, or I don't know how many hours they teach them a week, if you're not going to give them a whole, expanded curriculum with everything in their language, then at least, give them a curriculum that they will understand and be able to use in their daily lives, a language that they're actually going to be able to use in their daily lives. So, the language that they're learning right now in the current system, they can't write text messages to each other. They can't write a shopping list. They can't use it in their daily lives. They go on to church on Sunday and pray in this language, and that's it. Okay. On the other hand, we have some schools in northern Iraq that are Syriac curriculum. The whole curriculum is mostly in the spoken language, but they only have one course which is in this classical language, in this classical Syriac language. But they're not very popular and they're not well funded.
Okay.
They're not well funded by the government in the north.
I see.
Yeah. And another problem is they are forced to use the curriculum that the autonomous Kurdish region wants to use.
I see.
And so they often learn things about Kurdish nationalism, which is against the whole concept of being Iraqi, actually. And they learn about people that have been designated as Kurdish national heroes who massacred Assyrians historically. And this has all been translated into the Aramaic or Syriac language for these kids to learn. Yeah, it's tough, huh?
Yeah.
It's like a Kurdish child going to school and learning about Chemical Ali or Saddam Hussein being a hero.
Oh, wow.
So
This is insane.
So we also have this problem. There needs to be a unified Iraqi national curriculum for everywhere in Iraq, in my opinion.
Okay.
North and south. There needs to be development of a strong Iraqi national identity, which will be multi-ethnic, multilingual, multi-religious, which needs to be taught to future generations so that they appreciate Iraq's diversity. And they need to be taught تربية وطنية. They need to be taught, to be patriotic.
تعرف أنا كنت راح أسألك هذا السؤال برأيك شلون إنه ممكن إن نربي هوية عراقية إن نصنع هوية عراقية تحترم الكل. فأنت قلتها تربية وطنية، يعني إحنا محتاجين تربية وطنية بها.
كان عندنا تربية وطنية. وقت النظام السابق
اوكي
كان يدرسون تربية وطنية، بس من شالوا الحكومة السابقة شالوها.
مهم ترجع.
Yeah, we need it.
Yeah.
And, you know, we need to get Kurdish and Arabic students mixing with each other, Turkoman and Assyrian students mixing with each other, Yazidi and Mandaians mixing. We need to you know, take students on field trips, take students to the museum, take them to Babylon, take them to Samarra, take them to these places, show them their history, connect them to their land, connect them to each other, take them to a church, take them to a mosque, take them to Amanda, take them to you know, to Lalish, take them to a synagogue. I don't know. Show them who we are as Iraqis.
وهنا راح تنبني الهوية.
Exactly.
صح، لأن راح يصير أكو اعتزاز، راح يصير أكو حب. الأبروتش هو الحب، مو إنه أنا أحسن منك وأنت أقل مني.
مو فقط الحب أو المحبة. The idea is when you learn about another group, you're breaking that wall of ignorance that's between you. Because when you have this wall of ignorance between you, when you don't know each other, when you don't understand each other, you hate each other, you resent each other, you fear each other.
صحيح.
You don't trust each other.
صحيح.
Because you don't know enough.
صحيح.
Okay? Now, look, for example, I meet a lot of people here in Baghdad who grew up with Assyrians. And they know how to speak Assyrian.
Wow.
And they know all about our culture because they lived with us.
Hello.
And because, you know, yeah, they experienced our culture. They went to our churches. They went to our celebrations. And they appreciate it. And they miss it. And they're nostalgic for it.
صحيح.
You know, and we need to share our cultures and our languages and our religions with each other and learn about each other. You know, why not? Why not have, you know, for example, someone that's Arabic learning Kurdish, you know.
شكو بيها حلوة أصلاً.
It's actually beautiful. It's breaking down those barriers.
حلو.
That's what we need more of. We need to build bridges between each other because at the end of the day, we live in the same country with each other.
صحيح.
And we need to build a future together.
صحيح. نتعلم شلون نتعايش مع بعض باحترام وتقبل وحرية.
بس احنا تعايشنا مع بعض. صارنا
قرون.
يعني مئات السنين قرون أو آلاف السنين متعايشين ويا بعض.
It's nothing
we
new.
need to relearn it, I would say.
صح.
Or we need to redefine it in a way that suits the 21st century and is forward-looking.
نجي على سؤال حلقتنا الأخير نيكولاس. شنو أكثر نصيحة سمعتها بحياتك وأنت تمشي بيها؟
I hate questions like this, to be honest, because you put me on the spot. أنا سامع هواية نصايح بحياتي.
Okay.
So I'm just going to pick one.
Okay.
And go with it. So when I was, let's say 18, 19, when I was on this trip of self-discovery, and I was joined along the way by friends from Australia, from Melbourne, specifically. And, you know, one of them was about 13 years older than me. So they weren't like friends that were my age. They were more traveling companions, you know, people that I knew from back home, and that had an effect on me as well. And one of them was a doctor, and he always used to tell me, don't dwell on things. Because I always used to dwell on things, you know. I always used to think, well, should I have said it that way? Should I have done this thing that way? You know, it got annoying, actually. It would get debilitating. It would stop you from doing other things. And it would actually, you know, you'd start going crazy thinking about things that really have no meaning. And he just told me, you know, let it go. Okay. Don't dwell on things too much. Just let it go. Just move on. You know, it doesn't matter that much. And so that was probably the best advice anyone could have ever given me, because, you know, when you stop dwelling on things and just let it happen the way it happens, you know, هذا الموجود, you know. So you live a happier life. Let me just say that.
أكيد.
Yeah.
شكرا على جيتك اليوم للبودكاست، أنا كلش استمتعت.
وأني أكثر، أني اللي دا أشكرك، الشرف إلي هي.
شكرا نيكولاس.
عفوا.